The day my parents told me they weren't coming to my graduation, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. I just sat very still and listened to them explain, calmly, almost casually, that they had already booked a vacation with my brother, a resort, non-refundable. That was the word my dad used. Non-refundable, like that settled it, like I was the thing that could be returned. What happened next, they never saw coming. And honestly, neither did I. My name is Nadia. I was 23 when this happened. And for most of my life, I had been the daughter who was easy to forget. Not in a cruel way. That's the thing about this kind of invisibility. It doesn't come from hatred. It comes from habit. My parents weren't monsters. They were just people who had quietly decided, somewhere along the way, that one of their children needed more than the other. And that child was never me. My brother Keon was the one who needed more. More attention, more help, more grace when he made mistakes. He was charming and loud, and always in the middle of some crisis that required everyone to orbit around him. I learned early that the best thing I could do was stay out of the way and handle my own life, so I did. Growing up, I watched my parents light up differently around him. Not dramatically, just the way a room feels warmer when someone opens a window on one side and not the other. When Keon walked in, the energy shifted. When I walked in, life continued. My milestones were acknowledged the way you acknowledge a weather forecast. Noted, then forgotten. When I got my first academic scholarship, my mom hugged me and said she was proud. By dinner, the conversation had turned to Keon's new apartment and whether my dad could help him cover the deposit. I paid my own way through university. Scholarships, part-time work, careful budgeting, skipped lunches. Keon's rent, car, and several emergency situations were quietly absorbed by my parents. Nobody ever said it out loud. Nobody had to. I watched it happen and said nothing because saying something would have required them to see me. And I had already learned they preferred not to. When graduation came closer, I still called. A part of me, the youngest version of me that still believed things might be different, needed to hear what they would say. My mom answered on the second ring. I told her the date, the time, the auditorium. There was a pause. Then she told me they had already planned something with Keon. He was going through a hard stretch, she said. He needed the trip. My dad got on the line briefly to agree with her. Neither of them asked whether I needed anything at all. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. My graduation gown was hanging on the back of my door, still in the plastic wrap from the school bookstore. I stared at it, and something happened inside me that I hadn't expected. It wasn't the usual collapse, the quiet implosion I'd gotten so used to. It was something more like stillness, the kind that comes after you've been waiting for a verdict for years, and it finally arrives, and you realize the waiting was the worst part. Now it was over. Now I knew exactly where I stood. And for the first time in my life, I decided to stop standing there. I want to be honest about something. Being overlooked for your entire childhood doesn't make you tough. Not really. It makes you quiet. It makes you very good at convincing yourself that things don't bother you when they do. It makes you an expert at swallowing things whole and smiling and moving on. I had been doing that since I was maybe 9 years old, since the year I won a regional science competition and came home to find my parents busy coordinating Keon's birthday party, and the trophy sat on the kitchen counter for 2 weeks before someone thought to ask me where it came from. There were 100 moments like that. My high school honor roll announcement the night my brother had a minor car accident, and suddenly every family resource pointed in his direction. My college acceptance letter read once and placed face down on the table, while my mom called Keon to congratulate him on getting a promotion he'd mentioned earlier that week. The small writing fellowship I received junior year, which I mentioned at dinner and which was met with polite nodding before my dad asked Keon if he'd figured out his lease situation yet. These things don't break you all at once. They build up slowly, like sediment at the bottom of a river, until one day you realize you've been moving around a weight you forgot you were carrying. The week after the call, I was at my friend Priya's house. We'd known each other since freshman orientation, and she was the kind of person who never let a silence feel uncomfortable. Her parents were in the living room when I arrived. Her mom folding laundry, her dad reading something on his tablet. They asked how things were going. Priya's mom asked specifically how graduation prep was coming along. And something about the directness of the question, the fact that she remembered, caught me off guard. I told them the truth. I hadn't planned to. It just came out quietly, the whole of it. The resort, the non-refundable booking, my brother's hard stretch. When I finished, Priya's mom set down the shirt she was folding and looked at me the way adults almost never looked at me, fully, without already thinking about something else. Her husband put his tablet down. The room was very quiet for a moment. "That's not okay," Priya's mom said. Not dramatically, just clearly, like a fact. Then she said something that undid me a little. She said they would love to be there, if I wanted them, if I'd have them. She said it gently, without making it feel like charity, without making me feel like a problem being solved. She just offered, and I said yes before I fully understood what I was agreeing to. That night, back in my apartment, I sat with my phone in my hand and almost called my parents. Old instinct. The urge to soften everything, to warn them, to keep the peace. But I sat with it long enough to let it pass. I didn't owe them a preview of my life. I had spent 23 years trying not to inconvenience people who were never inconvenienced by ignoring me. That was finished now. What my family didn't know was that my life had been quietly growing into something real. I had been working in content development for 2 years alongside my studies, writing and producing and revising and failing and trying again in the hours between classes and shifts. I never mentioned it at home because it never came up. And it never came up because nobody asked. I kept my professional life separate from my family, the way you keep something you care about, away from something that might damage it without meaning to. 3 weeks before graduation, the director of partnerships at the company pulled me aside. She told me that a project I had developed had been greenlit for full production. She said there would be formal recognition at the ceremony, a public acknowledgement coordinated with my university. She asked if I was comfortable with that. I told her yes. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text my brother. I updated the guest form the school had sent me and listed the names of the people who had thought to ask how I was doing. The morning of graduation, I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt ready. I pressed my gown, adjusted my cap, looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. I didn't see someone waiting to be validated. I saw someone who had finished something that cost her something real. That was enough. The auditorium was everything those mornings always are. Noise, perfume, crying mothers, fathers with oversized cameras. I scanned the rows once out of a habit I hadn't broken yet. Then I found Priya's parents in the family section. Her mom was already waving. Her dad was grinning like he'd been waiting all morning. Something warm and completely unexpected settled in my chest. I crossed the stage when my name was called. I shook the dean's hand. The applause was loud and genuine, and for the first time in my memory, I let myself receive it without immediately looking for a reason to minimize it. Then the dean returned to the microphone after the last name was called. He said there was a special recognition from one of the university's industry partners. The room settled. I felt my pulse shift. A woman walked out from the wings of the stage. I knew her immediately. She had been part of my professional world for 2 years. She had read my drafts and pushed back on my ideas and told me when something wasn't working and pushed me to make it better. She stepped to the microphone with the ease of someone comfortable being heard. She described the project. She described what it had become. She said the name of the graduate responsible. She said my name. I walked back to the stage on steadier legs than I had any right to have. The lights up close were warmer than they look from the audience. She handed me a folder. She spoke about the production budget in broad terms, the scope, the timeline, the opportunity. The room was very quiet. Then she said she wanted to acknowledge the family who had supported this graduate throughout her journey. She turned toward the audience, not toward any empty seat, not toward any section where my parents would have been sitting. She turned toward where Priya's parents were sitting. She asked them to come to the stage. They didn't move at first. Her mom looked around as though checking whether she had heard correctly. Her dad leaned toward her and said something. I caught her eyes and nodded once. They stood. The walk down the aisle felt like it took a long time. People turned to watch. When they reached the stage, Priya's mom was already crying. Not quietly, not politely, but fully, the kind of crying that happens when something unexpected lands directly in the center of your chest. Her dad kept his arm around her, and his jaw was tight, in the way men hold themselves when they're trying not to show that they're overwhelmed too. The woman handed them an envelope and a framed acknowledgement. She explained it simply. a recognition, a thank you, a tangible expression of gratitude to the people who had shown up. She said the amount once. The room reacted, gasps, then applause, then people rising to their feet. Priya's mom covered her mouth with both hands. Her dad blinked hard and pulled her closer. I stood beside them and let it be real. I didn't look around for anyone else. I didn't think about a resort or a non-refundable booking or a brother who needed more. I thought about every early morning I had worked alone, every draft I had thrown out and started over, every time I had kept a piece of good news to myself because there was nobody at home who wanted to hear it. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt located, like I finally knew exactly where I was and who I was standing with. When the ceremony ended, we walked out into the afternoon together. Priya's mom held my hand for most of it. Her dad kept saying he couldn't believe it, shaking his head, laughing. We took photos, we talked. I breathed in a way that felt different, slower, like I wasn't bracing anymore. Then my phone started going. At first it was a buzz here and there, then it became constant. I pulled it out eventually. The screen was covered. Missed calls from my mom, texts from my dad, a flurry of messages from Kian, who had never once texted me about anything I had accomplished. 70-something notifications in total, stacked on top of each other. Some were frantic, some read as angry. A few were simply my name repeated, as if saying it enough times would make me answer. I turned the phone face down and put it back in my pocket. We went to dinner, the four of us. Nothing grand. A small restaurant near campus, with good food and warm lighting and a table by the window. Priya's dad made a toast. Her mom kept reaching across to squeeze my hand. At some point, my phone buzzed again against the table and her mom glanced at it and then at me. "You don't have to," she said. I told her I knew, and I meant it in a way that surprised even me. The story got out faster than I expected. Clips circulated. People had opinions. Some said I had been calculating and cold. Others said I had simply told the truth with my actions. I didn't engage with either side. My parents reached out through relatives, through old family friends, through a message relayed by an aunt asking for a conversation. They said there had been a misunderstanding. They said they were my parents, and that meant something. They said they deserved to have been recognized. I heard the message. I thanked my aunt for passing it along. Then I went back to work. Because here's the thing they could not accept. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they missed the moment. And that is not the same thing, not even close. In the weeks that followed, my life didn't erupt. It steadied. Work continued. Priya's parents checked in every few days, not for updates, not for drama, just to ask how I was. The calls from my family slowed. The messages became less frequent. The silence I offered back wasn't a punishment. It was simply the truth made visible. I had stopped performing for an audience that had never really watched me. What I hadn't expected was how little guilt I felt. I had spent years believing that love required you to absorb whatever was given to you and still keep offering more. That family meant you stayed, even when staying cost you pieces of yourself. Now I understood something plainer and harder to argue with. Love shows up. It adjusts its plans, it asks how you're doing, and actually listens for the answer. Family is not the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up when it counts and stay long after the cameras have turned off. When people ask me about my family now, I answer without hesitating. I tell them about a woman who set down a towel she was folding and looked at me fully. A man who made a toast at a restaurant table and couldn't finish it without his voice catching. I tell them about the seats in the front row that were never empty. Those are my people. That is my answer, and I'm not ashamed of a single word of it.